podcast for established marketers, entrepreneurs, and CEOs. The ones who want to join me in my mission to create 200 new multimillionaires who solve world problems with entrepreneurship. If that's you, then this podcast was created to give you access to the tools, training, strategies, and tactics you need to achieve multiple seven-figure profits as soon as possible. This world needs the best business you can build, so please get ready, open your mind, believe you can do this, and let's build a better world together for future generations. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Daryl Urbanski, your host as always, and today we are joined by my friend Adrian Savage. Adrian is a dad, a geek, and an entrepreneur, and he's been an Infusionsoft certified consultant and developer for the last 6 years since he left the corporate world. And when one of his clients had a major issue getting their emails delivered, he quickly became an email deliverability expert. In fact, to solve his client's problem, he created WeDeliver.email, a unique solution that lets Infusionsoft users deliver their emails through third-party providers without changing the way that Infusionsoft works. Since then, he's worked with many well-known names to help them improve their email deliverability, inbox placement, and audience engagement to help them get their message out more effectively, get more emails opened, and ultimately get more sales. I've asked him to join us here today because for anyone using email in their business, they know making sure your message gets through and gets opened is not as easy as it once was. So Adrian, thank you for joining us, my friend. How are you doing?
Hey Daryl, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm doing really well, thank you.
That's awesome. And we've talked shop a little bit on email deliverability. And for some people, if you're listening in and, if you're just a fan of the show and listening to this and it doesn't seem to relate to you, like before email used to be like mail. If you tried to mail your customer, it wasn't guaranteed your mail would actually get delivered all the way through. There was a lot of drop-off points. When you drop it off at the post office, they may have just thought it was junk mail because if you were doing bulk mailing and just thrown some in the trash, it might not have been delivered to the proper place and then just kind of been thrown out because it was improperly sorted. The postal worker at the other end that's supposed to do the route and pick it up maybe wanted to get out early one day and didn't think your letter was important. There's a lot of missteps that can happen along the way. Now, when we first came out with electronic mail, that wasn't as much of an issue, but over time, a lot of these drop-off points kind of have established in their own little digital ways. So part of what we're here to talk about today is that exactly, because just because you're sending out 1,000 emails or 20,000 emails doesn't mean that those people are A, getting them, or B, that they're opening and reading them. So now, Adrian, can you maybe give us a scope a bit about what's going on in the email world today? I want to talk a bit about your story, but really to get started, just to kind of paint the picture for people, what's the environment right now for a lot of businesses?
Whoa, okay. Now, the greatest comparison I normally make with email deliverability is it is a little bit like search engine optimization or SEO. You know how everyone's always playing this game to try and stay one step ahead of Google and try and make sure they're on page one of the rankings and all this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And the really scary thing is that getting your emails into the inboxes of your audience is probably now even tougher than keeping ahead of Google with SEO. It's reached the point where the landscape is shifting, maybe not on a daily basis, but, weekly, monthly, there's little changes, and for so many reasons it's just getting harder and harder to get your emails open and read by your audience. So it is really just around not necessarily keeping one step ahead of things, because as long as you do the right things then you're going to have success, but it's more around just understanding how the system is changing. And we're talking billions of emails every day are being sent around the world. And the reason it all went wrong in the first place is because of our favorite topic called spam. And if it wasn't for the fact that all these really shady characters out there trying to sell their, all the things, your phishing emails, your fake emails, your scams, your Viagra adverts, all this kind of stuff. And because of the proliferation of that, everyone's had to put defenses up against, emails that you don't want. And the result of that is sometimes the legitimate stuff doesn't get through, or because it might look like it's not legit. And then the other challenge, of course, is that, when I started, I've been in the IT world for 35 years or so now. And back in the early days when email came out, it was like it was a novelty and nobody used it. And if you got an email, you read it. Whereas now, I have a fairly quiet inbox and I get maybe 200 mails a day. And I'm sure not going to read all of them, because even though they've come in, they've got through the spam filters and all the rest of it, then I just don't have time, and most of them don't capture my interest. So I'm only going to open the mails that I really want to see. So you put all that together and it's getting harder and harder and harder to actually get your emails to the point where they go out to your audience, they see them, they open them, they read them. So what I can share is a few hints and tips that will make it easier for you to achieve that, because at the end of the day, if you can't engage with the audience, then you can't add value to them, you can't get your message out there. And, to most business people, and even if you're not in the business, even if you're just keeping in touch with someone personally, if your emails don't get read, you've got a problem.
Now, before we even jump into that, can you tell me a little bit about your story? Like, how did you get started? Do you come from an entrepreneurial family? You were in the corporate world to begin with. Like, what was your path on being a business owner itself?
Yeah, it's an interesting story, because I was so not cut out to be an entrepreneur. My family was all, traditional, old school. So, I've been a geek since I was 7 years old. So I was very lucky. My dad brought home an Apple II computer to help him with his work. He kind of didn't get on with it very well. He was about to sling the thing out the window, which is when 7-year-old Adrian starts reading the manual and teaching dad how to use his computer. So that turned me into the geek that I am now. So I was kind of marked for that. I studied computer science at school. I worked hard. I got good results. I got a job. I got into corporate life, did IT and telecoms. And to be honest, I'd still be doing that now, and I'd probably be enjoying it if I hadn't had a few life-changing experiences, like getting divorced, like having my ex-wife move to the other end of the country with my kids. So suddenly I had a few wake-up calls that meant I had to change my life. If I'd have stayed in corporate life, I'd have had no time off. I wouldn't have seen my kids. I wouldn't have built a relationship with them. So something had to give. And that was how I discovered the whole land of, being an entrepreneur and business and sales and marketing and that kind of thing. Found that a lot of entrepreneurs get absolutely terrified with technology. So I kind of took my geeky approach, combined that with sales and marketing, discovered Infusionsoft, and I guess the rest is history. I really got into Infusionsoft in a big way. One of the few guys around the world who's got 100% on the certification exams several years running.
Wow.
Since then, I've a little bit moved away from Infusionsoft, having learned that actually I much prefer working at a strategic level, helping people really grow their businesses. And Infusionsoft is just one of the tools that allows that. And then obviously, as you mentioned, I had a client that had problems with their emails getting through. And I suddenly came upon a solution almost by accident, because I'd worked out how another client could send emails from their website that was blacklisted without going into spam using some software called Mandrill. I had another client using Infusionsoft that couldn't get their emails through. And I kind of put two and two together and made probably about 4,000, to be honest, because I worked out how to get Infusionsoft to talk to Mandrill, so that when Infusionsoft couldn't get the mail through, we could use this other tool as an alternative. So you had the best of both worlds. You had the automation and the power of Infusionsoft, but we're using another third-party tool to actually deliver the mail. That solved the problem for that client. And I suddenly realized that if that client's got a problem, then maybe a few others out there have as well. And that was how We Deliver.email grew. So right now I'm running that business, and that's it's a really successful, very, very micro niche business. It is literally, a few dozen customers. So there's not many people that need it, but the guys that need it, it makes a massive difference for them. I'm still doing my general consulting, and I'm also doing a lot of work now as an email deliverability. I use the word expert loosely, because I hate anyone who brands themselves an expert. I'm not an expert. I'm just a guy who's done a hell of a lot of research, learnt what I can, and whatever I learn, I'll share with as many people as I can to help them. So if that makes me an expert compared to some people, then that's cool. But from my perspective, I'm just learning what I can and sharing that as widely as possible.
So what have been some of the greatest challenges for you in your business career, and how have you overcome them?
Oh, the biggest one, without a doubt, was overreaching. I was trying to do too much too quickly, getting some grand ideas, building a team, and I wasn't ready for it. So that was probably the biggest challenge, because before I knew it, my costs were outweighing my revenues, all this kind of thing, and the business had a very tough time. I had to make a very tough decision to scale it right back and just start to focus on one thing at a time. And that, coincidentally, that was about the time that We Deliver was born as well, just when I was, pretty much retreating back a bit, licking my wounds, working out how to be more successful than I had been. And it was almost by accident that, it is sometimes it's interesting how the right thing comes along at the right time. But I was just ready to do something slightly different, slightly new. And that's when the opportunity came to solve this problem for my client, which, I'll be honest, it took 6 months of blood, sweat and tears. But by the time I'd got to the end of that, then it was very clear that I had a product that I could market as well. So whereas I was mainly intending to stay doing consulting and marketing advice and things like that, then this opportunity came, and I was just lucky enough to see the opportunity and have, I guess, with apologies to Liam Neeson, I did have the right particular set of skills that let me build the solution.
I love that. And so what I love about this and what the audience should be listening to is that you solve one person's problem and then found a way to make it scalable, that you could do that for thousands of people.
Yes.
I love that.
Absolutely.
Because that's the quintessential thing. There's a lot of people that have grandiose visions of solving a million people's needs, but at the end of the day, it's one customer at a time. And then thank goodness, because of technology and that, we find ways to multiply and scale ourselves. So I just love that, because you focus on solving a problem, not so much of a market. And then now you've got a problem, and now you're going, who are the people that suffer from this problem, and which ones, do I want to deal with? Because that's the thing.
Yep.
You know what problem you solve, and there's a whole host of people that have that problem. You get to cherry pick the types of customers you want. So I really like that. And I liked how you talked about focus. You said you focus on one thing at a time. I got a favorite acronym for focus: follow one course until successful. Focus. Follow one course until successful. Do less, better, and to completion. That's such a great thing.
Absolutely. And the thing is that is an antidote to a horrible disease called entrepreneuritis. Mm-hmm. And every entrepreneur I've ever met at some point or other becomes a shiny penny chaser. And there's always one next great thing just around the corner. And I think if you can manage to focus on one thing and follow it through to completion, then that is consistently the answer to success. Mm-hmm. Is focus and being single-minded. And I'll admit, I suck at it. I've had to work really hard at being single-minded, and even now there's a few too many little distractions that I've got. When I focus on the one thing, that's when success comes along every time.
Yeah, I think that's so true. So what would you recommend to people who are starting out and struggling in their businesses?
I think it is. It's a variant on what we've just said. It's pick one thing and become brilliant at it. That's the most important thing. At the same time, though, and this is the thing that really tripped me up for a long time, is you have got to be supremely confident that you can do it. I think it is way too easy to allow yourself to get in your way, to not have the confidence. It's not good enough to think you can do it. You have to know that what you are doing is going to be successful. Yep. Anything less than that, and you're setting yourself up for a big fall, because you've got that bit of doubt at the back of your mind that someone's going to find you out. And I'll be really honest, it's been a massive challenge for me, and I've had too much self-doubt for too long. And it was only when I reached the point when I could deal with that self-doubt, when I could start to choose to ignore that little crazy person in my head telling me that I couldn't do this, and start to really, truly believe in myself and have supreme confidence I could do it. That's when it all starts to come together. And the more I practice that, the more successful it becomes.
I think that's so powerful, because if you don't believe in yourself, why should anybody else believe in you?
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And the other thing that, if anyone here is listening to this and they feel like trapped in that, something that helps me from time to time is, if I ever feel like I'm getting that way, it's not about you. You have to remember that it's not about you at all. It's about the other person and their problem.
Yep.
And I mean, if I'm suffering from a problem, if my neck was bleeding and someone who's not a trained professional was willing to try to help me and get me to the hospital, right? I don't really care. Do you know what I mean? Like, let's go. I don't care you're not a doctor. Yeah, hold the towel on my neck. Let's go. Yep. Like, it's not a question of that. And so a lot of people forget that, is that if you're in a nice to have category, move to a need to have category. That's where it's focused on the problem, because if you're problem oriented, you're a need to have for somebody. And when you're a need to have, their neck is bleeding because they need to have it.
Yep.
And so it's not about you, it's about them. And it's about the problem that you're trying to help them solve.
Yep,
so all these feelings of inadequacy and all that sort of stuff, they can go out the window, because you are just there to serve. So it's the same thing. I mean, you're allowed to charge a fee because you're entitled to earn an income. You are worth earning an income. That might be something you have to address on a subconscious level. But beyond that, just, hey, I want to help you along the goal. I might not be the only person you come to for help, and I may not be the last person you come to help for this, but I'd really like to take a swing at it, and I think I can do a great job. You know what I mean? Like, and remove yourself from the equation. I think that's something that helps me. Obviously we can only do so much on a call, but I think that's a good tip, is just to not make it about yourself, Yeah,
exactly. Because I think the thing is, if you've got something that's absolutely amazing and you're not sharing with it as many people as possible, you are ripping them off.
Yep. Yep.
It's as simple as that. If you've got something, then it is your duty to share it in whatever way that works for you. And, going back to what you said about money, I know that some people have, they have money issues. I certainly have in the past. And again, the way I look at it now, I'm going to put the value out there. And when I do a good job, then I get rewarded. Money is nothing more than a round of applause for a job well done.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to do the best darn job that I can.
Mm-hmm.
And then when that gets recognized, then, hey, I'm open for that round of applause. It's as simple as that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to keep on doing a really good job.
That's it. So well said. So now, what do you see are some of the greatest mistakes you see your clients and entrepreneurs making in terms of like email marketing?
Being scared to let go. That is the biggest mistake out there.
What does that mean?
And what I mean by that is, supposing you've spent years and years building up your email database, and it doesn't matter whether you've used Infusionsoft, MailChimp, Aweber, it doesn't matter. Imagine you spent all these years building up this email database, and then someone like me who claims they know everything comes along and says, right, you've got to delete half of your contacts out of your database now. Because if you don't do that, you're going to lose the ability to communicate. And people look at me as if I'm mad. And there's a massive, massive terror that comes along at the prospect of, hey, you're telling me I can't mail half my list anymore? And the reason, I'll come to that in a little bit, but bearing in mind you have to be able to let go sometimes. You have to recognize that some people just don't want to hear from you anymore, and you have to let them go. And that is probably the biggest mistake people make, is that they won't let go of it. And I'm a little bit of a sexist joke here. But you know how it's always the guys that say that size doesn't matter?
Yeah.
Strangely enough, it's the same guys that will not let go of their email list, and they're all about the size of their list, not the quality. And maybe it's a coincidence, maybe I'm being a bit unfair on the guys, but my female clients seem to be much more pragmatic and much more willing to cull their list if it means they're going to get better results.
Right.
But it is an interesting one, because it's one of these cases where really and truly less can be more.
So why am I deleting half my list? Like, if you give me a good reason, I will, but why?
Okay, sure. So this all started to change. I first learned about this, it's probably about 6 years ago, when I was just first getting into Infusionsoft, and the phenomenon of engagement scoring was in its infancy. It was something that Google and Gmail had just started to do. I'll explain briefly how it works. Imagine you're sending 10,000 emails out. So you've got an audience, you've got 10,000 people on your list, and you're going to send an email to all 10,000 people. Now, these days, probably a little bit more than half of your audience will be using Gmail or G Suite or one of the Google email tools to manage their email. And that's quite scary, because it means that Google can see pretty much half of all the emails that are going around the world. And what that allows them to do is it allows them to start crowdsourcing engagement data. And what I mean by that is that they can start to keep tabs on all the different email senders in the world and work out who's sending out junk and who's sending out stuff that people really want to read. And imagine you're sending out emails to 10,000 people and only 500 of them actually open that email. What that's doing is that's telling Google that pretty much there's a load of rubbish being sent out there that nobody wants to read. And then imagine if that same person keeps doing that day after day, week after week, month after month. Google's going to be watching that, and they're saying, dude, no one wants to hear from you. And at that point, what Google's going to do is, if this happens long enough and the engagement stays low, then Google's going to say, I think this is a load of trash. I'm going to start putting it into the spam folder. And it's all done on the behavior of the audience. It doesn't matter how good that email is. If people aren't opening your emails, then Google is going to spot this, and they're going to start taking action, and they're going to penalize you by, it might be that you just end up in the promotions tab, or it might be that you end up in the spam folder. And it is very much down to what the behavior is of your audience. And Google pioneered it, but it's no surprise now that Microsoft is doing it, Yahoo is doing it. So it doesn't matter which email provider you're using, then the chances are your behavior is telling them whether or not they should put this mail in the spam in the future.
And I think if for people that may be like that stupid or not quite get it, I think you have to remember, for the email service providers, Gmail wants people to use Gmail and nothing else, right?
Yep.
They don't want you to use Hotmail. They don't want you to go anywhere. And if you have to think, if someone were in your room, I've said this, I've been saying this for years now, probably at least 3 years. If someone was in your office and you were just barking at them and they never looked at you, they never said and acknowledged and nodded their head, they never said anything back, how would you rate on a scale of 1 to 10 the quality of that relationship? Do you know what I mean? Like, it would obviously not be a good relationship. There's no engagement. They're not even really acknowledging your existence. They're not responding. They're not doing anything. And it's the same with email. If you're blasting emails at people and they're not opening, they're not clicking, they're not doing anything, that's obviously, like you said, Google and these people are going, this is just junk, this is spam, we're going to put it in the spam folder. And so that's a great analogy. Now, do you have to delete the contacts? What do you recommend? Do you just start filtering out how frequently you email those people, or what? Do you just delete them?
Okay, so the simple answer is it depends. The slightly more detailed answer is that the big thing is how good you are at keeping your database clean and up to date. Because one of the issues that you've got is if you just keep mailing people and let's suppose their mailbox becomes inactive or something like that, they close their Gmail account down or something, that email address is going to stop working. Now, if you're using any decent email marketing tool, then it will realize this and it will stop you from sending mails. But supposing you don't send emails out very often to your audience, then it might be that if you wait too long, and we're probably talking 6 months here, so as long as you're keeping in touch with your audience reasonably frequently, you won't fall foul of this unless you're being a bit of a naughty boy or a naughty girl. But as long as you're removing people with dead email addresses from your list, then you're not going to trigger spam traps and things like that, because what all of these providers will do is, supposing I've got an email address at Google that is just adrian@gmail.com or something like that, and I stop using it, then Google are going to wait 6 months, and then maybe after 6 months or so, they're going to reopen that email address if no one else has claimed it. And what they'll be doing is they'll be looking to see who is still sending emails to that address which hasn't been active for more than 6 months. And if someone repeatedly sends emails to that, which is it's a spam trap address, then again you will very quickly get blacklisted, not just by Google, but there's all kind of different organizations out there like Spam House and all these other blacklists. And they're looking for that kind of behavior to actually catch people who aren't looking after their list. So that's one of the reasons why you should actually delete people. But as long as you're mailing slightly more often than that, what you need to be doing is just looking at who is opening your emails and how often. Because as an example, if there's someone who hasn't opened a single email for you for 3 months, then something's gone wrong. They're either not interested anymore, or they're all going into the spam, or whatever it is, but they're not seeing your emails. Now, those guys, by continuing to mail them, you're giving Google the chance to realize that they're not engaged with you. If that's a widespread issue, you're going to find that it becomes a vicious circle, because the fewer people that see your emails, the fewer people will get them delivered to. So what that means is, at that point, certainly you should stop emailing in general. And this is where the purpose of something called a re-engagement campaign might come in, because it's not unreasonable to give people one last chance. It might be that they just got distracted and maybe they're seeing your emails come in and they're just kind of ignoring. So you can put together a re-engagement campaign that will just send an email saying, hey, do you still want to hear from me? If you do, then click on this link and I'll keep sending you an emails. And if for whatever reason they still ignore it, then there might be you send an email, is this goodbye? And then maybe one last email saying, right, that's it. And then after that, you stop. The beauty of that is you can automate all of that. If you're using Infusionsoft or ActiveCampaign or any of the more sophisticated marketing automation platforms, you can automate the whole process. So you can say every time someone gets to 3 months where they haven't opened an email from you, then you can actually put them into a re-engagement campaign, and it will automatically give them this kind of one last chance. And then if they still don't respond after that, you've got to, maybe not delete them from your database. If you're not being charged per contact, then you might choose to just put a tag on there or deactivate them or something like that. But at the end of the day, you just got to do something to make sure you don't keep mailing these guys, because you're not doing anyone any favors. They don't want to hear from you, and you don't want your engagement to go down any further.
Right. And there's things that you can do, especially in today's day and age. You can try to re-engage them with exporting the email and uploading it to something like Facebook or Google AdWords, where if you have, I think, at least 100 email addresses, you can run ads to those people, and that would be a way to try to re-engage them.
Absolutely.
But I think people are really protective. People are really protective of their email inboxes, right? Like, you can show ads on the sidebar of Google or on Facebook, or again on a page that you're going like Google AdSense or whatever, AdWords, the display network. But if you're in someone's email inbox, people treat that like you're in their house.
Well, it is. And the thing is, email is a very, very personal thing still, because, people get very, very highly outraged if they think that getting spammed. And, so the easiest way to get shut down from sending email is if you just annoy one person sufficiently to the point where they make a personal abuse complaint about you.
Right, right.
You know how you've got the feedback process. So at the bottom of every email that comes from any marketing platform, you've got an unsubscribe link, and then they give you the chance to report that as spam. If you're using anything like Gmail or Yahoo or Hotmail or whatever, there's a spam button right at the top of your email client as well. And all of those things, in theory, that will stop the mails going out. However, if you really dig deep, then you'll find there's also a way of reporting abuse, and you can actually contact whichever mail provider the sender is sending their mails through. And you can send, it'll be abuse at, whatever, aweber.com, abuse at infusionsoft.com, whatever it is. And you can send a human written complaint to that. And as long as you can justify it and hold it up, those guys will investigate, and they will come down very hard on that person.
Right.
So you've got to make sure that if you're sending out thousands and thousands of emails, then you don't want to upset people to the point where they're going to do that, because I've seen it happen. Because then, as long as you are squeaky clean, you're okay. But if you're doing anything that's even slightly shady, and you come to the attention of the email compliance team in whichever ESP you're using, then you're going to have a whole long conversation that you haven't got time for and don't want. And depending on the provider, they might actually shut down your email sending while you're having the conversation as well. And if your business depends on email, then that can become very costly very quickly indeed.
Yeah, very scary. Very, very, very scary. And like you said, it's a conversation you don't want to have, because as soon as you're having that conversation, the chips are stacked against you already.
Yeah,
so I think that's fantastic. So can we recap on some of the best habits you feel that have helped you and your clients have fantastic email lists? And I love what you said before, too, that it's not about the size of your email list, it's about the relationship. I know of people that have done over $100,000 with an email list of 200 people,
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's because the quality of the relationship. And I think that that's really important. So can you maybe speak to the habits, or just recap on the habits? To have a really highly engaged list and a clean list?
Yeah, I think the main thing, and I'll kind of widen it out a little bit and say that people who are most successful are the ones who take responsibility for their own email reputation and their own email quality. Mm-hmm. It's way too often I hear people blaming the email service providers. They blame Infusionsoft, they blame MailChimp, they say, deliverability sucks. Mm-hmm. I have spent a lot of time comparing all the different platforms, and in particular I've worked a lot with the email teams at Infusionsoft and ActiveCampaign. And the one thing I will say is these guys, they literally work tirelessly, almost round the clock, to make sure that their emails get through as best as possible. And there is nothing that these guys aren't doing on your behalf to get the emails out there.
Right.
So anyone who starts coming along saying it's Infusionsoft's fault, then I will agree that maybe one time out of 100 there might be a specific scenario where the provider has got a problem, either that affects your specific audience or maybe everybody, but that's a rarity. But most cases it is down to the quality of the emails. People think that there's a deliverability problem, but actually in most cases it's just that because of the way that you're sending your emails, then the Googles and Hotmails of this world are just deciding not to put it into the inbox. There's a very big difference between a deliverability problem where the emails literally aren't getting as far as Gmail versus an inbox placement problem where it's got as far as Gmail and Gmail's just decided, hey, I'm going to put this in the spam.
Right.
So it's very much about the mindset and not blaming deliverability and saying, I take responsibility for this. I just need to do whatever I can to make sure my emails and my sending, my habits are good enough to get me into the inbox.
And, there are some tools in people's that are out there in people's favor to make this easy, because it might sound kind of scary or daunting right now. But a couple of things that I'd like to speak to that kind of feed off what you mentioned was, like, changing a provider won't help, right? If you're with someone, if you're with ActiveCampaign or Aweber or NetAtlantic or whoever, and you're having email issues, it won't help you to switch to another provider. In fact, it can hurt you. Is that accurate?
I'd say 99 and a half times out of 100, then switching providers is going to make no difference. And you're absolutely right. When you switch to a new provider, you are always going to have an uphill struggle because, again, there's something else called Snowshoe Spam that I won't go into now because it would take way too long to describe it. But the idea being that spammers will often use multiple different platforms to send their emails out. So if you suddenly start using multiple platforms at the same time to send your emails, then you're going to trigger a Snowshoe Spam filter. And even if you just move from one to another, then, again, Gmail knows that, right now, so take you as an example, Daryl, you might be using Infusionsoft right now. If you suddenly switch to Aweber, then Gmail is going to say, hey, this guy's started using a different platform. What's going on?
Right.
And they're going to look on that much more suspiciously than if you just carry on using your existing platform.
Right.
So it's about developing a habit, and consistency is key here. Don't chop and change between platforms because it's certainly not going to help.
Right. And then owning the quality. So because people think email is cheap, because in some ways it is cheap, but people's attention isn't cheap. If you waste, I mean, it's like when I'm regrettably, there's people that, in fact, earlier today, I'm not going to go into details, but there's people that have access to me because of family relations.
Mm-hmm.
And, unfortunately, they've just abused it to the point where, out of courtesy, I sit there on the phone. Yes, yeah, okay. But realistically, I'm not engaged at all, right? Like, I've totally checked out.
Yep.
And email's the same thing. So just because you can write an email and send it to people doesn't mean you should, doesn't mean it's a good idea. And so when you had to pay to put letters in the mail, if you had to pay $1, $2 per letter, and you were going to mail 500 letters, you would put a lot of thought into that, because that was going to be $500 to $1,000 you're going to spend. So you get really clear about, look, what do I want to say to these people, right? Because I'm going to be spending this money. What do I want to say? But with email, it's like, da-da-da-da, oh, done. And it's so fast, it's so thoughtless. So it really, in some ways, it can be a disadvantage.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the thing that's to people's advantage is what you said before, is you can automate this. You can schedule these. So it doesn't mean you have to constantly be coming up with new I mean, you do need to constantly come up with new emails, but you can come up with a good topic, a timeless thing, something relevant, catchy, interesting to the person and the end user. And then you put that in your responder so everybody gets that on day 10 or everybody gets that on day 42. And so now you don't have to constantly be the hamster in the wheel, so to speak, every time somebody signs up, every time somebody buys your product. You can already have those emails pre-written to go out. And so that's the one thing that I think is to our advantage right now. But it sounds like for a lot of people, there's going to be a continually uphill battle, because I think people are just going to crack down more and more and more on these, like you said, on these people that are just kind of wasting people's time. And
yeah, absolutely. And going back on what you've just said there, you've really hit the nail on the head in that, yes, it's possible to automate all that stuff. And the thing is it's with you've got a lot of power there, and with power comes responsibility, because it's way too easy. And this is why I do love the more sophisticated platforms, the Infusionsoft Active Campaigns of this world that have real sophistication, because you can't just do a one-size-fits-all approach anymore. You can't just send the same stuff to everybody in the hope they'll all want to see it. You've got to be able to personalize the emails so that people are only going to receive the ones that they want to receive. Mm-hmm. So let's say you're running a pet shop, and you are not going to send an email about how to look after your dog to 5,000 people who only own cats. Mm-hmm. You just wouldn't do it. But at the moment, that's effectively what people are doing with their simple email marketing platform. They're not segmenting their audience, they're not working out what they want to really see, and they're not sending the appropriate content to the right people at the right time. And again, that's a recipe for disengagement. This is all about how are you going to get as many people as possible to want to open your stuff. So you've got to use every single trick that you can think of to make your content relevant.
Right. Relevancy is everything.
Exactly. Because if it's not relevant, if they don't want to hear from you, they're not going to engage with you.
Yeah.
And again, it's going back to, the size is not important. It's the quality. It's, are you sending out stuff that people really want to hear?
Right. Right. Yeah, the worst thing you can do is waste someone's time.
Yep.
Because if you do it often enough, they're not going to give you their time again.
Yep, absolutely. And worse than that as well, in many cases, they won't even hit the unsubscribe button, because actually getting people to unsubscribe is really cool, because it means that you're not wasting someone's time. But the thing is, you're just going to be fighting against apathy.
Yeah.
So it's almost, you want to make it as easy as possible for your audience to unsubscribe when they've had enough. And in the meantime, just give them as much value as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so well said. So well said. So where do you see the future of this? Where do you see things going? Where do you see things evolving 5 years, 10 years from now?
I think that email is really changing, and I think that it's already changed to the point where it's one of several different forms of engagement, because now we've got things like Facebook Messenger, we've always had things like text message SMS, we've got, people using various apps on their mobile phone, we've got WhatsApp. So I think, email is no longer the only game in town. So now it's becoming part more of a multi-channel strategy. And what I'm seeing now is how, as time goes on the one hand, it's still going to be crucial to recognize that email has a really important part to play, and we have to get as many people engaging with us via email as possible still. But certainly if I look at the younger generations now, then they're much more likely to use different communication channels. So my daughter's just turned 18, and last time I was in the same room when she went into a Gmail to find something, and she had about 10,000 unread emails in there. She just doesn't use her email because she's using Snapchat, she's using whatever it is. So I think it's about being diverse enough to have multiple ways of engaging. So you have really, we've always talked about multi-step, multimedia engagement campaigns, but now the multimedia bit is really widening out, because you've got to not just send different types of media, you've got to use different channels to reach people.
Right.
So, the more versatile a platform can be, so you can use all these different platforms. And I think that's where the future is starting to lie. But at the same time, email, I can't see it dying anytime soon, because it's still, for many things, it's the best way of getting the message out. It's like, you're not going to send a job application via WhatsApp as an example.
Right.
So I think it's about get the message to match the medium and the channel. That's the most important thing. But recognize that as long as you continue to get into good habits and make the best of it, then email still has got plenty to do. And it is just, protect your reputation, work on your content, send the right stuff to the right people. All of those things, will make the difference. And sure, there's lots of techie stuff that you can do, but I'll always advise people to keep away from the techie bits until you've got your house in order, until the content is right, until you're sending things out that people really want to hear from you.
So how do you have any tips on that? How do people make sure their content is right? Because an email, it's hard to gauge. It's not like a web page. I can set up a heat map, right? I can count clicks on my website. I can look at Google Analytics and see how long people are up on my page. How do I check my email? How do I validate the quality of my email content?
Yeah, this is a tough one. This is where if I'm working with a private consulting client on their marketing strategy in general, one of the things I'm always going to put in there is to make sure they're using communications channels that allow two-way feedback. Because the only way you're going to find out, if you send out 10,000 emails and no one clicks the link, you won't know why.
Right.
You'll never know. So this is why I love things like phone calls, telemarketing, stuff like that. So if you've got a big audience, then maybe you've got to check in with a few people. Small audience, maybe you can ring them up a bit more. And I'm a massive fan of having interactions like that where it's actually one person talking to another. But that's kind of a side note. The other thing that I really advocate massively, and this is more difficult if you've got a big database, is actually encourage people to reply to your emails. Ask them questions, get them to engage with you. And I will share a little kind of power tip here. The most likely way to get people to see your email in their inbox is to ask them to reply to you. If someone replies to a message inside Gmail, Gmail sees that as one of the strongest indications that they want to still hear from you.
Right.
So, so sending out, because normally if someone sends out a survey by email, they say, click on this link or click here for this, click here for that, whatever it is. And sure, that's a sign of engagement, but it's not a great one. If you can actually get someone, if you can motivate them to the point and incentivize them to reply to you, then that's a massive indicator for Gmail that you're sending out quality stuff. Now, obviously, you've got to be careful not to shoot yourself in the foot here, though. If you send a mail out to 10,000 people and you say, reply and tell me what you think, or reply and tell me what you want next, then you sure as hell have got to reply to those replies. You can't just ignore them, because suddenly that's going to really upset people. So you've got to make sure you've got a system in place, an infrastructure, probably with real human beings, to actually do that, because while engagement is very important, I've seen this on Facebook and Twitter where you'll have a big business and they'll be posting, they'll be blasting lots of stuff out, they'll be letting lots of comments and replies to their Facebook posts, their Twitter posts, and guess what? They don't reply to any of them. And they very, very quickly lose credibility. So if you're going to do, it's a real ninja trick to ask people to reply, but you've got to make sure that you're ready to deal with those replies. And if you do that, then this is gold dust right there.
There you go, words from the man himself. So I think that that's really powerful, and it does speak to engaging with people and having real conversations. And there's a tendency for people to not want to engage with their customers, not want to have to talk to anybody, to be able to be left alone in a room and just have money appear in their bank account and then be able to go do what they want with their family and friends. And the reality is that if that's how you feel, you either need to get out of that or need to find a place where you can come from a point of servitude where you really want to help people and engage with people and, do something you're passionate about.
Yeah, exactly.
Or just go get a job where you can clock in and clock out, because otherwise it's just going to be the bane of your existence.
Yep.
A lot of companies are scrambling because their target demographics are aging. And so people who watch TV is an aging demographic. And that's a mass media channel. And unfortunately, a lot of the younger generation, they're going online. And there's YouTube, sure, but there's a ton of other niche video sites. And people are watching video on Facebook and all sorts of stuff. And they're getting really specialized. And it's hard. I remember I had an opportunity to speak with Greg Ranker from Guthy Ranker, the infomercial company that's got like Proactive and 101 other products, literally hundreds of millions of dollars per year. And they're trying to find a way to push volume online like they do with television. Television, they get one spot, they put it on a couple networks, and they're pushing like millions of impressions. Big money.
Yeah.
But they're aging. Yeah. They're aging. And they're nervous because they don't know what they're going to do to replace that. They don't know what they're going to do to replace that in 40 years. That's something that they're afraid of today.
Yeah.
And that's where, like you say, by taking these practices, by building a community, a tribe, by building a better relationship with people, you become magnetic to those people, right? When you become hyper relevant, people want to open your messages. They're like, dude,
absolutely.
You got to connect with this guy. Let me introduce you to this guy. You need to talk to him because he does things really well. And that's where your stuff can become viral. So I think that's a really powerful message to share. So I guess the next thing I want to kind of ask is like, well, I was going to say, like, if anything, what do you think holds people back from implementing this? Is it just a lack of knowledge? Is it a fear of a dip in, I don't know, what?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and sometimes, and I'll include myself in this, people can be a little bit too quick to think that everyone else is the problem and not look at your own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's very easy to think, well, this email that I created, then it's perfect, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And more often than not, then it can probably be improved. You can probably get better. So I think it is the big thing is just about taking responsibility and saying, okay, so what steps can I do to actually make this better? How can I serve my audience better? And I think that's probably the biggest thing is it is just absolutely taking responsibility and starting to think about ways that you can improve. And it is, I think some of it, there's a lot of kind of, I guess it's misguided old world thinking where people are just thinking that the rules haven't changed from 10 years ago where you could literally blast out 10,000 emails and everyone would love you. And it has changed, and some people realise this. Other people, they see their open rates going down and they're saying, oh, it's just because the platform I'm using isn't as good as it is. But, in reality, they're declining everywhere, and unless you're doing something clever, you're not going to buck the trend. So I think it is. It's about, but also people try, they try and game the system. It's like, I still know people that will maybe put 50 empty lines at the bottom of their email so that the unsubscribe link
button's pushed all the way down. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it's like, why on earth would you do that? You're making it harder for your guys to unsubscribe, which means that instead you'll just get ignored, and there's just silly things like that people don't realise it's a bad thing to do.
Yeah.
But all they're doing is shooting themselves in the foot.
A great quote comes to mind where don't wish it were easier, wish you were better.
Yeah.
Don't hide the unsubscribe button. Don't wish it were easier to keep people on your list so you can blast them. Wish you were better so people wanted to be on your list.
Exactly. If someone doesn't want to hear from me, then I'm quite happy to let them go. On my, because I've built a very small niche list of Infusionsoft users that are interested in deliverability, and I've got maybe 700 people on that list. It's a comparatively small list, and every time I send an email out, I will get 3 or 4, 5 unsubscribes. Mm-hmm. But that's absolutely cool. I'm happy for that because it means maybe they're not using Infusionsoft anymore. Maybe they just don't like what I've got to say. But that's absolutely fine because it means that I'm not wasting their time anymore, and it's not wasting resources that I could be using elsewhere. It is just, get the value out there, and if the value's there, the day that I send an email out and suddenly 100 people unsubscribe, and I know that I've goofed big time and I've got to, raise my game.
Right.
But it's about keep an eye on the numbers because it is, a little tip I'll share is never compare your open rate with someone else's. But certainly, because I could double anyone's open rate by going in and deleting half the contacts that haven't engaged. That's one of the tricks. But on the other hand, you must compare your open rate this week with your open rate last week and the week before and the month before.
Right.
Because if the trend is that it's going down, then you've got to recognise that and do something about it.
What I love is that you're talking about the trend because open rates are more of a chest beating metric than an exact science.
Yep.
But the trend should be the same.
Exactly.
If you're adding, hundreds of people, thousands of people to your list per week, you might have to be more careful because you might have, onboard a mass of people from Yahoo and then a mass of people from Gmail and a mass of people somewhere else. So that can fluctuate your open rate. But generally speaking, for the general population, for 80% plus people listening to this, open rates will just be a trend and something to watch and, and pay attention to that. But just know that those metrics are really hard to track. And so it's all about the trend. And things growing or are they declining? That's fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly it.
So, Adrian, you've been so forthcoming and helpful in this. I feel like we've really made some headway and hopefully given people some stuff to think about. Are they engaging with people? Are they having two-way conversations? Are they just blasting people? Are they barking at someone in a corner in the room who's not looking at them, who's not nodding, who's not responding? If that's the case, then maybe they need to change their approach and get out of that because it might be okay today, but the way the things are going, it will not be okay tomorrow. And how do you segment people to give them more of what they need, they want right now, and even change it up after a while? Because their life's going to change. They're not going to be the same person in a year with the same issues, hopefully. And so that's some real heavy thinking to think about. Think about those things and how do you build that into your business and how do you incorporate that and how do you plan for that? And I think there's been some wonderful nuggets we've given people. Is there anything I should have asked you about that I didn't ask you about?
It's a tough one. I mean, I could talk on this for hours, days. days, weeks, months probably. What I'm doing, rather than try and cover one last thing now, anything like that, then it's probably a good time to actually share there's a brand new free mini guide that I'm just launching. It's a series of emails all about email deliverability, inbox placement, showing you exactly how you can maximize your deliverability and engagement with your audience. And what I'd love to do, if you're okay, is for me to just share the link to that.
Yeah, do it.
I've actually got 2 bits in there. It starts off, then you can just put your name, email address in there, and I'll put you through the guide. But at the same time, I've also actually included a little email deliverability survey in there, because what I'm really keen to understand is, well, what are people seeing out there in the real world? What are your challenges right now that I maybe might not have covered yet? What trends are you seeing? What do you make of your platform? What are the particular problems? How can I help? I'd love you to just hop online, certainly request the access to the mini guide, and I'll start sending those emails out, and that's nice and easy. If you'd be willing to fill in the survey that comes as part of that, then that will really help me. And at the same time, I will help you guys by being able to actually tailor the content that I provide to match that. So again, it's a perfect example of practicing what I preach. I want to know what people need, because I'm then going to go give it to you guys. And to get hold of that is really, really easy. You just need to hop onto the website, and the web address is just http://wedeliver.email/guide. I'll just repeat that. It's wedeliver.email/guide. And if you go there, then that'll give you everything you need to get you an even better chance to get your emails in front of more people, so they're reading your emails, they're engaging, and that can make massive difference to the business.
And I think that a lot of the principles we talked about, it's not just for email either. It relates to email as well as to any other communication that you're doing with your clients. It's just the channel might be different. There's tactical nuances to email for sure, but being relevant and interesting to your prospects and the people you're messaging, that doesn't matter whether it's Snapchat, whether it's Facebook, whether it's text, whether it's even in face-to-face and in person. So go check out wedeliver.email/guide. Adrian, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always an honor and a pleasure when we talk. I really value and appreciate you, especially for coming and helping me share with my audience today. So thank you so much, and I just wish you all the best, and thank you.
No, thank you, Daryl. It's been a real pleasure. And just the last note there, if there's anything that I can help with, then you're welcome to find me on Facebook. It's just facebook.com/Adrian Savage. Add me as a friend, ping me a message. Obviously, you know how to get hold of the mini guide. So always happy to help if I can.
You've reached the end of our interview. Now, first, let me thank you for listening. I appreciate and respect you more than you'll ever know. And now I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. First, what 3 lessons did you just learn? What 3 aha moments just jumped out at you? Second, what can you implement for yourself and your business in the next 24 hours? Third, what can you give to someone else to help you with, or give them to just do it for you? Whatever it is, remember, taking action is the secret sauce to results. Now, if you think this interview would be helpful for a friend, please give them a link to it. It'll help them, and it'll help me too. I'd also like to invite you to help me find out more about the challenges you're facing, your dreams, your goals, and how I can help you overcome what's holding you back. We both do better when we know better, and your success is my success. So please reach out and interact. You can visit our website, bestbusinesscoach.ca for Canada or California, where I'm from and where I'm living. You're welcome to also try out one of our paid programs. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and pretty much every other social media channel you can think of. You should also subscribe to the podcast, and if you're enjoying them, please leave us a nice review. It really helps. That's all for now. Once again, thank you. Take care of yourself, and remember, the world needs the best business you can build. And I believe in you.
So look, I was privileged enough to sit in the room the other day and listen to Daryl present.
I had the great fortune to spend some time with Daryl Abrinsky during this week, and we had an incredible 2.5-hour presentation from Daryl.
Daryl was amazing. I got so many little nuggets of wisdom.
I hadn't heard Daryl speak before, but what struck me from his presentation was
he's one of these hidden masters in the internet marketing world who's worked on some pretty incredible launches.
Daryl has a ridiculous amount of knowledge.
Daryl Abrinsky's presentation was absolutely great. I really loved
an incredible knowledge of numbers. He is a very articulate, very knowledgeable very advanced marketer.
Well, he talked a lot about keyword tools and how to research your niche.
So it really created a lot of predictability around moving forwards in our business with the marketing and sales aspect, which is so important to any business to really see it grow.
Where he walks you through step by step
How to judge in detailed form how much money you could potentially make from a market based on AdWords, keyword research, and putting together quite complex Excel spreadsheets.
And what I took away from it is not only understanding your niche market, but also looking at and breaking down and going, am I working with the right niche? Is there enough demand there for me to be able to reach my goals? And doing that hard research.
There's a lot of gurus out there that present you a lot of the why and the what, but they don't necessarily give you the how. And what I really found with Daryl's presentation, there's no holding back. There was no holding back the screens or the curtains. Like, everything was given to really assist us.
His feasibility and due diligence is incredible, and he was able to show us in a really short space of time how to cut through the overwhelm.
You're giving us the exact tools that we can use to test something before we even go to start testing it by spending money on it.
One of the biggest nuggets that I got out of his presentation was that when people pay, they pay attention, and when people pay a lot, they pay a lot of attention. I just love that. I think that's a great way to look at how to price yourself.
And he was a great speaker, lots of energy, and it was really great to spend time with him.
Honestly, phenomenal presentation.
I would love to catch up with him, next time I'm in this part of the world.